What is going on, everyone? This is Brad from the MTG Homebrew Network coming at you guys with another Commander deck tech. Today we are going to be looking at a very notorious commander, a commander that has been around for a little while, and a commander that is absolutely a blast to play. And that commander is Brea Etherium Shaper. So for a white, a blue, and a black, you get a 4/4 artifact creature. When Brea enters the battlefield, you create two 1/1 blue Thopter tokens, artifact creature tokens with flying, and it also has this absolute gas second ability where you can pay 2 mana of any color and sacrifice 2 artifacts to deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, give a creature -4/-4, or gain 5 life. So Breya has a lot of versatility on top of being able to produce a lot of tokens. So we sort of really run with the theme of tokens in this deck. As you can see from the little, deck list in the top left, half of our decks is creatures. We play a lot of creatures with a lot of enter the battlefield effects. Again, if you've seen my last deck tech with Siege Rhino, you know that I absolutely love to abuse enter the battlefield effects. So we play a lot of creatures in this deck, and it is a very creature-centered deck. And just to go into a little bit about the style of this deck outside of enter the battlefield and generating a lot of Thopters, this is a deck that I like to call Thoptercrats. The whole point of the deck is to generate as many Thopters as humanly possible, and then attack with them, and then sacrifice all of them. It's a very fun deck, so we are going to get into the creatures. First up, we play Aviation Pioneer, just makes a Thopter. Great. Baleful Strix, one of my favorite cards ever printed, enters the battlefield, draws a card, is going to be helpful no matter what time we play it. It's going to draw us a card, and it's also an efficient blocker with having flying and death touch. We play Blood Artist because, again, this is a Thoptercrats deck, so we are playing Aristocrats within the deck, so we have a sort of Aristocrat package within. So we play Blood Artist as one of those pieces of the package. We play Breya's Apprentice for flavor as well as its effect. When it enters the battlefield, it makes a Thopter token, and also has the ability to sacrifice an artifact to exile the top card of your library and have the ability to play it until the end of your next turn, or give something +2/+0 until the end of the turn. Simply in the deck to make us a Thopter, and that's really it. The second ability is very helpful, especially when you don't have a lot of cards in your hand, so it has a lot of versatility to it, and Breya's Apprentice is kind of a really cool card. Next up, we have Butcher of Malakir. Butcher of Malakir is an absolute pain in the ass of a card in any Aristocrat deck. I will gladly trade my 1/1 Thopter for anyone's commander any day. So Butcher of Malakir is an absolute gas card. Thopters are dispendable, commanders not all the time. So Butcher of Malakir makes the cut. Chief of the Foundry is in the deck because we are going to be creating a lot of Thopter tokens, and we are going to be swinging with them a lot of the time. So being able to buff them up a little bit is absolutely sick. Corpse Knight, absolute great card. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent loses a life. The ability to ping each opponent is absolutely gas in a multiplayer game. And we're going to have a lot of creatures entering the battlefield because we have a lot of creatures themselves that make other creatures, so whenever we play a creature, very rarely will Corpse Knight ever trigger once. We also play Cruel Celebrant, another one of those Aristocrat style cards within our package, and whenever we sacrifice a creature, or whenever another creature or planeswalker we control dies, we're gonna ping each opponent for 1 and gain a life. That sort of Aristocrat package, it fits right in there. Disciple of the Vault sort of also fits in with our Aristocrat package. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. It is target opponent, so that is kind of, a little downfall. But Disciple of the Vault triggers when Thopters hit the graveyard, because they are artifact creatures. They are artifacts, and even though they dissipate when they die, they do still hit the graveyard first, so Disciple of the Vault's pretty gas. Dusk Legion Zealot for card draw. enter the battlefield card draw is going to be very good in this deck, especially when we play cards like Panharmonicon in order to double those triggers. Experimental Aviator simply creates 2 Thopter tokens when it enters the battlefield. Filigree Familiar, kind of a great utility card. It's an artifact creature. When it enters, it's going to gain us 2 life, and then when it dies, it's going to draw us a card. We play a lot of sacks. We can sack this to Breya in order to draw a card, so that second ability triggering isn't something that we really have to worry about. So great utility card, really cool card, really cool common. So we play a little Filigree Familiar. We play Fleshbag Marauder as, removal. Play Fleshbag Marauder, sacrifice your Fleshbag Marauder, make each opponent sacrifice a creature. Usually going to be the play when we play it. Gearport Gearcrafter enters the battlefield, make a Thopter. Hangerback Walker makes Thopters all the time, so Hangerback Walker is just a sick card. We do play Jeskai Sage. Jeskai Sage is one of those cards in the deck that simply exists to draw us a card, and we do play a lot of sack outlets in the game, or in the deck, so being able to draw a card is something that will be easily triggered. Next up, we play Jor Kadeen, the Prevailer. We are always going to be triggering that Metalcraft ability. Again, much like Chief of the Foundry, it's going to buff up all of our Thopters, and the combination of this with Chief of the Foundry makes all of our Thopters 5/2s, and when we have 20 of them, that's a lot of damage, let alone the ability to sack them afterwards to ping Aristocrat triggers. So Jor Kadeen is going to buff our Thopters into big beefy boys and kill our opponent pretty quickly if we have a lot of Thopters. Maverick Thopterist, again, creates 2 1/1 colorless Thopter tokens, but the ability to have Improvise is kind of sick. Tap 3 of your already existing Thopters, pay a red and a blue to create 2 more Thopters. Great. Next up, we play Mayhem Devil. We are going to be sacrificing some permanents and some artifacts, so we are going to be dealing damage with them with Mayhem Devil to slowly kill our opponents. Again, Aristocrat package, this is one of the cards in there. Merciless Executioner, again, just like Fleshbag Marauder, one of those removal cards that we can really use to get rid of scary things and make people sacrifice creatures. We play Ornithopter for flavor, and it is a great card. That's kind of the only reason. It's a Thopter, fits the theme. We love Ornithopter. It's a free Thopter. We also play Ornithopter of Paradise, a little burp Thopter. It helps us with our ramp, as well as later on in the game when we don't necessarily need it, classifies as a Thopter that we can sacrifice later on. Also gets buffed, so its 0 power is irrelevant when you have Jor Kadeen or Chief of the Foundry out, because that thing is now a 5/3, or 6/3, 4/3, for no real reason. Next up, we pay Pia Noir. Pia is great. She enters the battlefield and makes a Thopter, and also says you can pay 1 and a red to give an artifact creature +1/+0 until end of turn, and you can also pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact and give target creature unblockable for the turn, or give target creature the ability to not block. Great card, gonna make us a Thopter, provides us with some pretty good utility, so Pia Nalar is a pretty cool card in the deck. Next up, we play Pia and Kieran Nalar. Enters the battlefield, makes 2 Thopters, and also has the ability to pay 2 and a red to sacrifice an artifact, and Pia and Kieran Nalar deal 2 damage to any target. This allows you to sacrifice artifacts or sacrificing your Thopters to trigger Aristocrat packages, as well as being able to deal 2 damage to anything, including opponents' faces or even creatures. We also play Pilgrim's Eye because it's going to get us a land to our hand and also classifies as a Thopter, so we play it for some slight utility as well as some slight flavor. I know there's some better cards that I can replace this with, but to fit the theme of the deck, we continue to play Pilgrim's Eye. Playcrafter, just another one of those effects that makes people sacrifice creatures when it enters, so the redundancy is great. So Playcrafter, definitely a great card in the deck. Priest of the Forgotten Gods is one of our best sacrifice outlets. Tap, sacrifice 2 other creatures, and any number of target players each lose 2 life, and sacrifice a creature, and then you get to add 2 black and draw a card. Sacrificing 2 1/1s for all of that value is something that I will take 10 times out of 10. And Priest of the Forgotten Gods is always kind of a feels good card whenever it hits the battlefield and stays around for a little while. You're going to be sacrificing a lot of Thopters, so this is just a great sack outlet. We play Perforos because if we don't kill our opponent with swinging and flinging, we are going to kill them simply for our Thopters existing. Anytime we play one of our creatures that makes Thopters, it's going to be doing a lot of damage. Especially with our creatures that make 2 Thopters or sometimes 3 Thopters, whatever it may be. Perforos is going to deal a lot of damage, and Perforos can, deal upwards to 10 to 20 damage every single turn to each of your opponents. So Perforos is an absolute gas card, and if you play enter the battlefield effects in red, you're going to want to play Perforos. Next up, we have Reckless Fireweaver. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So again, a lot of Thopters entering, they are artifacts. Each one of them is going to deal 1 damage to each opponent when they enter. Really gas card, absolutely amazing card, and is low-key one of my favorite cards in the deck. We also play Shroom just to get back any artifacts that we may have in our graveyard that we sort of rely on in the deck. Just a great card, so we play Shroom. Soul Herder is in every single deck that I play that has white-blue in it because I play a lot of Blink. So Soul Herder is going to give us the ability to blink something at our end step, as well as gets bigger anytime we blink something. So it becomes a threat on the board as an attacking creature, as well as having one of my favorite abilities in the entire game, and that is to blink something at your end step. So Soul Herder, absolutely gas card, as well as an absolutely amazing artwork. Just gas. We play Taste of Karlov because we are going to double up on any of our death triggers or our aristocrat triggers anytime we sacrifice a Thopter. And it also says creature tokens you control have vigilance and lifelink. So Thopters with vigilance, flying, and lifelink are kind of really cool. So Taste of Karlov is an absolutely amazing card in this deck, and is one of the cards you kind of want to have on the battlefield when you're doing all your shenanigans. Thassa Deep Dwelling, pretty self-explanatory. Another blink effect at your end step. Most of the time, if not all the time, you are going to be triggering or blinking something that makes you Thopters, even if it's simply your commander, because again, your commander enters the battlefield and makes 2 Thopters on her own, so blinking any sort of creature that makes you Thopters, including your commander, is going to be your primary target. Thopter Engineer, very, very good card, enters the battlefield and makes a Thopter, and also gives your artifact creatures haste, so all your little Thopter boys, when they enter the battlefield, can come out swinging, so that's really great. Thought Monitor, another artifact that we can sack to artifact sacrifices or anything like that, but that is, the least concerning part of that card. For 6 in the blue, bullshit. You're not paying 6 in the blue ever. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be paying 1 blue. You get a 2/2 with flying that when it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. Affinity for Artifacts is an insanely easy ability to trigger within this deck. So you're going to be paying 1 blue to draw 2 cards, sometimes 4 cards. That's just great value on top of being an artifact creature. So it's just a great card. And if you're playing artifacts in blue, you play this card. Next up, we play Visceraseer, one of the sacrifice outlets that we do have in the deck. You get to sacrifice a creature to scry 1. So again, one of our sack outlets for our Thopters after we sort of swing with them. Very self-explanatory, very good card. Wall of Omens is in here to help us draw cards, just like Baleful Strix, and, little blocker action. We also play Whirler Rogue to make 2 Thopters. Also has the ability to tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. So if you have a big boy, like if Soul Herder gets real big at some point, tap 2 of your little Thopters and make something unblockable, like Soul Herder. Next up, we play Yahenni Undying Partisan. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, he gets a 1/1 counter, and you can sacrifice a creature to give him indestructible. Just like Viserys here, we play Yahenni as a sacrifice outlet, especially a free sacrifice outlet, to sacrifice all of our Thopters to. And to round out our creatures is one of the other cards for our Aristocrat package, and that is Zulaport Cutthroat. Next up, we're just going to go into some of the cool artifacts that we play. Altar of Dimension and Altar of the Brood are very, 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 very good cards. Altar of Dimension lets us sacrifice our Thopters to make people mill. And Altar of the Brood just makes people mill whenever our Thopters come into play. So just a little cool combo of good cards. So yeah, just great artifacts for us. We also play Ashnod's Altar, yet another sacrifice outlet, so we're going to want to be sacrificing most of the Thopters that we have come out into play. So Ashnod's Altar is one of those just absolute fantastic sacrifice outlets. And then to wrap up our artifacts that are outside of ramp, Panharmonicon is in every single deck that I play. So Panharmonicon is going to be triggering every single creature that enters and makes Thopters. So any of our creatures that enter and make 1 Thopter are now making 2 Thopters. Any of our creatures that were making 2 Thopters are now making 4 Thopters. So Panharmonicon is an absolute gas card and just accelerates our game plan even further. And is the reason why we play so many creatures, and we play such a creature-focused deck, and play almost every single creature that makes a Thopter when it enters the battlefield, because we want to be able to get as many Thopters out on the battlefield. So, for example, when you play Pia and Kira Nalaar, Pia and Kira Nalaar are going to enter the battlefield and make 2 1/1 colorless Thopter tokens. With Panharmonicon on the battlefield, that turns to 4. 4 mana for 4 Thopters is a pretty cool rate, let alone if you were able to stack Perforos onto that. You just had 5 creatures enter the battlefield. You just did 10 damage to each of your opponent. And rounding out our artifacts is my absolute favorite card in all of Magic, and that being Panharmonicon. Panharmonicon is going to be doubling all of our creature enter the battlefield effects, primarily the ones that make Thopter tokens. So Panharmonicon is an absolute gas card. So for example, when we play Pia and Kira Nalaar, we are paying 2 and 2 red to make 2 Thopters, essentially. The body's great and all, but we're playing it for its ETB effect. We're going to be making 2 Thopters when we play it. Combine that with Panharmonicon, you are now paying 4 mana for the creature to make 4 Thopters. But it also, as the creature entering the battlefield with Pia and Kira Nalaar itself, you just had 5 creatures enter the battlefield. Combine that with things like Perforos, you just did 10 damage to each opponent. And when you combine that with things like Soul Herder and Conjurer's Closet, and Thassa Deep Dwelling, that is going to be very, very, very oppressive. You're going to be making 5 creatures 3 times in the course of 1 turn if you are able to have Panharmonicon, Thassa, and for example Soul Herder on the battlefield all at once. You are going to be making 12 Thopters and having Pia and Kira Nalaar enter 3 times on that turn. So that's 15 instances of creatures entering the battlefield, so you just did 30 damage to each opponent for 4 mana. Seems fair, right? But just to go into the last little bit of the deck, we play Bastion of Remembrance because it is, again, part of our Aristocrat package. Efficient Construction makes us a little artifact whenever, or a little Thopter whenever we cast an artifact spell. Goblin Bombardment is another one of our sack outlets, one of our better sack outlets as well. and we can sacrifice one of our Thopters to deal 1 damage to any target. Impact Tremors, again, baby Perforos. The redundancy is absolutely insane, especially when you have both Impact Tremors and Perforos on the battlefield at the same time. Any single creature that enters the battlefield is just a lightning bolt to each opponent, which is kind of insane. And then we play Thopter Spy Network. Beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, you make a Thopter. Absolutely great. You make a Thopter at the beginning of every upkeep. And then whenever more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get the draw card. So that is all I have for you guys today in terms of this commander deck tech. Breya is an incredibly fun commander to really mess around with. And if you're a fan of Enter the Battlefield effects as much as I am, this deck is going to be one that is an absolute blast to play. You're going to be triggering a lot of ETB effects and making a lot of Thopters. So if you enjoy that type of thing, this is the perfect deck for you. List any suggestions that you guys have for the deck list below. And once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech for Breya Etherium Shapter. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. Peace out.